everyone, welcome back to the Union Pacific Railroad Evanston subdivision. My name is Darrell Cruz, owner and builder of the layout, and your host for episode 36 of season 2024. It's been a couple weeks since I did an actual update. I was on vacation in Florida for a while, but I did make some progress this week on Devil's Slide. And no, I didn't do two of them there. That's just one with the reflection that I'm going to have to deal with. And I got some ideas on how we're going to camouflage that real well so that it all flows together very nicely. Make sure you subscribe, like this video, hit the notification bell, and best of all, become a member. You do get some perks being a member. So this is how it looked. Last update had all the cardboard webbing in and the rosin paper down, and had some plywood cut out to match the form of the rock formation known as Devil's Slide in Utah on the Evanston sub and along I-84. All right, to begin with, first thing I did was use some scrap styrene that I've been using from time to time as a kind of a barrier and a mask for painting, and today I was going to use it as a barrier for putting on the plaster. Now I basically cut the top off of this backdrop because it was bigger than I needed it for, and so I had this 6-inch section of backdrop that I've been using. I cut it into these little stripes, or strips I guess you should say, so that I would put it into the behind the mountain so that I wouldn't get anything covered there. Here you can see I was able to put it back behind the webbing and the paper and in front of the backdrop. So the idea was to protect the backdrop from getting plaster on it and then later on getting paint on it. So everything was kind of ready to go. Before I got started, I did have these screws. I took out a piece of wood and had some screws here left over, and I had been back here a number of times. That's me. But anyway, I got smart finally and used my cutoff wheel to cut those screws off. I had a couple scratches already. I was like, okay, I'm going to get serious about working on this. So I cut those off. Here's kind of what it is behind. This is where I'm working from, back in the corner of the room, back behind the layout. So you can kind of see where I cut off the piece of wood and how I was positioned. Not the most comfortable. Now here, this shows how I actually went under the layout. And this is how it goes. And I'm on my hands and knees and crawling towards this two-step step stool that I have in the back. And now I had to squeeze myself and turn around. I had the sound turned off while I was doing this because I was breathing pretty heavily. Not as young as I used to be. And again, I'm trying to get turned around. All right. So I'm turned around. I'm on the first step. And then I'm very carefully standing up using a little bit of a support there. And I am on the top step, I think. So it didn't take a long time, but I definitely got real tired of going back and forth. Definitely was a little bit of a challenge. Now, in the middle of the week, I did a members-only video where this was a live video, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday, where members were able to actually watch live as I was actually doing work on the layout. This was putting the plaster gauze on the layout. Now, I actually took it in profile instead of landscape because I had a problem with doing live videos. I finally got that figured out. I am able to do horizontal live, but basically was able to kind of do that live. So if you're a member, you were able to see that. If you missed it, you can still go and find it. If you're not a member, you just have to wait till Sunday when we do the update. If you want to become a member, there's a link in the video. Now, I kind of made a mess still, even with the plastic masking there. I still had a little bit of a mess. I'm surprised how much splatter there is when just using the plaster gauze, but I was able to get it all completely. The corner there where it was the big mess, that was like my longest reach. All right, so while I was letting the plaster dry, I kind of turned my attention to putting some kind of rock molds onto the two rock formations. I had cut out this plywood and kind of try to follow the shapes in the pictures. So I had two different shapes for the two different ones. Here I'm just basically using plaster of Paris and a little bucket. I'm using my what's it called, table to do this, and this is in the garage. Did it out here because it's outside and a little bit easier to work. Didn't want, if I make a mess, I don't have to worry about it quite so much. So I had these two rock molds that I got from Mark Bridgewater. Thank you very much, Mark. I've used this already on the Taggart Mountain, but I want to use it on these rock molds also because I didn't want to be very thick. I didn't want to have a lot of deep crevices and so forth. I wanted it to be fairly thin so that this didn't get too thick. So I put the plaster onto the mold, and then I basically just put the piece of plywood into the plaster and then let it dry. And this is what I ended up with. Now the shape of it is completely gone because I obviously went over the edge. Now I was kind of worried about how I was going to get this off of, or get this so that it would be, you can see the other side. So I was kind of concerned how am I going to get all that excess plaster off. But as it turns out, luckily, the plaster really likes sticking to the wood. And so if you kind of just break it off, it kind of breaks right along the wood. It does not want to come away from the wood. So when I broke it off, it was pretty close to the edge of the wood. Then I used a little putty knife to kind of scrape some more. Some of the corners there were still, I did scrape some more of that off, but you can see this is just by breaking the plaster, it came off quite nicely. You notice the bottom is nice and straight, which is good. So I was really happy with the way this first one turned out. Here's the second one. Again, I just kind of laid the molds down, poured in the plaster, put the plywood onto the plaster, waited about just about maybe almost 10 minutes for it to dry a little bit. I'm kind of trying to chip this off ahead of time, but to be honest with you, it worked better just letting it dry all the way and then breaking it off. I was trying to do both methods. Here's kind of what I ended up with. Now before I did the other side, I wanted to give it some time for this to dry completely. So it was dry to the touch, but it's still kind of cold and dark in color, and wanted to give it some time to dry completely before I messed with the backside. So I turned my attention back to the hill, and if you notice, it looks even more messy than before. That's because I had taken some plaster, 50% plaster, 50% water, which made a very thin plaster, and I used a brush to paint that then on there to give a little bit extra strength and smooth out the plaster. And then I also, you can see what it looks like from behind. I also had some paint there ready to go, and then the ground foam. So I basically just painted it and then sprinkled the yellow grass on first, and then some burnt grass, and then some more yellow grass, and then some, that was all fine. And then the last coat was some coarse burnt grass. I didn't even try to put any clump foliage or anything on there because I knew it would just roll down the hill. And here I have it wet it down and then sprayed some white glue on there. And as you can see, I got some water on the backdrop. So I was really not happy about that. The way it I was kind of worried. I was hoping that maybe if it dries, it'll smooth out a little bit. Got some on the mirror there as well. Wasn't too worried about that. I knew I could clean that up pretty easily. And then this is the next day. I let it dry for 24 hours, and the backdrop did smooth out pretty good. I removed the masking piece, the plastic masking pieces. And this is kind of how it looks. Now, I wasn't too worried about how this looked because there's going to be a lot of trees on this this hill. Here's a picture of the prototype, and as you can see, there's trees on both sides, and some of the trees are going to be used to just not only cover the backdrop, but also to hide the mirror image. Now, for the back side, I decided to do a little bit differently. I put the plaster right onto the piece of wood, and then I pressed the molds down into the plaster. That actually worked out pretty good. And so one thing was to make sure it came out right. This is to make sure that it's all applied evenly. All right, and so this is kind of what it turned out with plaster on both sides. Now, I was worried about it getting too thick, and I think it came out just about perfect. So it is thick, but not too thick. I think you still get the idea of the two pieces. Now, the edges were a bit of a problem because it still showed some wood and didn't look like rock. So I cut this mold that Mark Bridgewater gave me and cut it into these strips. And my idea was that I would put plaster on the edges and then lay the strips down like this. And then let that dry. I knew I wouldn't be able to put the mold on and without cutting it into strips like this. So here I have the plaster on there, just apply some plaster on the edges, and then I press the mold down onto the edge. And it actually worked out pretty good, a lot easier than I thought. I was kind of really worried how I was going to deal with the edge of the rock and getting it to look like rock on both sides and then on the top. So here's what they look like completely done. Might still do a little bit of touch up here and there, but for the most part it looks pretty good. I know that I'm pretty confident that when I get it colored with some gray washes and black washes, it's going to look pretty good. So I was very happy to see how that's something that been on my mind on how it was going to work. I kind of had an idea how I was going to do it, but I wasn't really sure how it was going to work and turn out, and I was really happy with the way it did. This is kind of what it looks like on the mountain. So it's actually really starting to look like Devil's Slide here. There was one little issue. That was a piece of glue gun glue that was hanging down. But one problem, if you look closely, you can see there's a big gap between the middle of the rock formations and the scenery. So what I had happen when I put it on the here you can see a big gap. When I put on the plaster, it actually made it kind of settle down a little bit. When I put the webbing together and everything so it would be as straight as possible, because I knew I was going to put these pieces on there. But then with the application of the plaster and wetting it down and everything, it's actually going to go up a little bit. It's not going to rest against the road. So it wasn't quite as bad if I put it up, but it definitely was too much of a gap there. So I went back and forth underneath the layout. I probably went back and forth about 12 times using different pieces of wood and so forth to push the plaster back out again. So from behind, I used some wood to push it back out and go back to its straight shape. So now we're good again. So that was solved. Again, these are not going to be resting against the road. They're going to go, I'm going to actually glue them in place a little bit above the road. That's how they are on the prototype. But definitely, I still need to get some trees in there, obviously, and everything. And I do have to also worry about the reflection. I'm going to put some trees in here. I have a glue bottle there to kind of get that idea. So I'm going to put some trees all along there. There are trees here. If you can see a picture of the prototype again, there are trees on both sides, some deciduous trees and also some pine trees. There's really not very many pine trees in this area, but here's a bunch of them on Devil's Slide. I'm kind of wondering if somebody planted those to avoid any further erosion or something, or what the deal is. But I think the trees will do a really good job of covering up the reflection quite a bit. And then I'm also going to have the interstate highway sign right here. I was going to do 2 of them, but I'm not going to do any on the other side. But that will hide it, especially when you're standing trackside. When you kind of look down, you'll still be able to see a little bit. But if the trees are in there and everything, the combination of the two should do a real good job. And then one last thing I'm going to do is put some trees there in the corner, right there where the mirror, the edge of the mirror. So I'm going to have trees there in the corner. So that most of that backdrop is going to be covered with trees. So that will hopefully all, with the use of the interstate sign and backdrops and so forth, it's all going to blend together. By the way, somebody mentioned, why don't you put some staging yards under Evanston? And here's a plan I already put together. 2 tracks coming off the helix. And John Watmore from Australia gave me this idea. And I think some other people had mentioned it also. But this would provide 4 tracks if you go all the way around of 86 or about 85 feet, which is enough for more than 100 cars and 5 engines. But what I'm probably going to do is use 2 of the tracks to have 2 trains each. That'll be 4 trains, and then maybe the other 2 tracks will be for longer trains. So that's something that's going to be coming down the line. I'm going to finish all the scenery first before I move to doing that. I really want to get scenery done all the way through the rest of the layout. I'm so close, especially with Devil's Slide almost done. I definitely will have it completely done this week unless something happens unexpectedly. I am expecting some trees to come in from Scenic Express, and I'll get those hopefully this week and be able to put those in. I'll get the rock formations colored and glued into place, put the interstate sign in, and I'll be done with that whole area, and I'll be able to move on to Wholesome Cement and Granger. So definitely looking forward to it. If you operate on my layout and you bring trains eastward out of Morgan going towards Green River, you go through Morgan. I'm going to replace that backdrop right there, by the way, with a really cool picture I took with my drone a couple weeks ago. May replace some of these too. But anyway, you come through Morgan, come down the line into the Weber River Canyon with this crossing here. There's going to be 3 river crossings on the layout for the Weber River Canyon, and there's probably twice that many on the prototype. There's tons of these bridges, a lot of these through truss bridges, and then some through, I should say these are through girder bridges. or open girder bridges, and then there's a bunch of through truss bridges. I have one in place right now. This is the Taggart Mountain, Taggart Tunnels. So a lot of scenery to look forward to. I'm so happy I'm to this point. I'm really ready to be done with this area. We'll come back to it again to do some detailing after I get everything done on the rest of the layout and, of course, weathering and so forth. Here's Interstate 84 with double slide in the background. Hopefully that's going to be camouflaged real well with the trees. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out. You don't really look at it from this angle usually when you're running trains, by the way. I'm kind of... This would be if you're about 5 feet tall. This is what you would see. So one of my grandsons, or my grandsons who are a little bit shorter, they would see this, but most people would have to bend down. So it's coming out pretty cool. Backdrops all blending in. And ready to move on to Wholesome Cement. Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. I really appreciate it. Sorry for the lack of an update last week. I'm going to do some more live videos this week, definitely. By the way, this pole is a pain, but it does block the double image a little bit. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. We are going to have some live videos this week. A couple of member only videos, and then maybe one just general live stream. So a lot to look forward to. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Have a great week. Take care.